So, good evening, everyone. I'm David Dawson. I'm director of the museum, and over in the other corner.
Hi everyone, I'm Nicola Trow and I'm the programme manager for the project.
So, we're going to be talking about the plans that we have for the Assize Court. The planning permission has just been submitted, but I think much of that is very similar to what you will have heard before. But what's quite exciting is we now have updated ideas of the displays we're going to have in the museum and how that will work. So more of that later. So I'm just going to share screen and a reminder that that your uh, video and audio is turned off, and you can use the Q&A button to ask questions at the end. So hopefully you're seeing full screen of the presentation.
I can see the next slide on yours, David.
Are you seeing the sort of editing view?
Yeah.
Oh, that's unprofessional. I've got the wrong one. So I will have to edit this recording after all. Apologies, everyone. I thought I was doing so well. It's better.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so we're going to be talking about the size court, and as many of you will know from what you said before, is that the building is completely derelict. So it was opened in 1835, built as the assize court for the town, for Wiltshire in many ways. And it really consists of two large courtrooms and various sort of ancillary rooms as well. It was sold by Wiltshire County Council in 1983 to someone who thought they would be able to turn it into sort of be able to reuse it. Unfortunately, those plans fell through. It was then sold to someone else, and then eventually bought by a businessman who saw it up for sale at an auction in London, thought it looked great, and bought it without really realizing that in Devizes you probably can't sell flats for £500,000 each in the 1980s and 1990s, which is what would have been needed to make an a viable development. So the building has been in deteriorating ever since. It's been on the Historic England's Heritage at Risk Register ever since that was created, and we've been working with the Assize Court Trust to find ways to bring it back to life. So the building is currently owned by the Devizes Assize Court Trust, a separate charity set up to hold the building and to preserve it while we've been working on the scheme to restore it and put it back into use. We have had funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, initial funding of what they call the development stage, which includes getting the plans for the building to the point where we can submit for planning application and to work out how we're going to use the building and how we're going to make sure that the whole thing is a real success into the future. I think does that sort of sum it up, Nicola? Good enough?
Yep, I think so.
So, so that's the basics. And Nicola has been running this program of what is called the development phase. We then apply again, we'll come on to that later, for money to actually do the work, the delivery phase. So at the moment, to us, it's an awful lot of money, but it's not enough to start real work on the building. With that'll come in a couple of years' time. So, Nicola, over to you.
Yeah, so it was back in the middle of 2023 that we were given just over 300,000 from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, alongside some initial funding from some generous other funders as well. So the development phase tends to last for 2 years. So we're now in the latter half of this and really starting to wrap up this phase. So what have we been doing? So, first of all, we now have a project team. So, including myself, we have 3 members of staff working full time on the project, which makes a lot of difference to when it was just David and I doing this almost in our spare time, getting it to this point. We've also appointed an expert team of consultants. So, David and I will be talking a little bit more about the architect and the exhibition designers as we go through, but we also have a fundraising consultant on board, business planners, evaluation consultants, a real team of expertise and knowledge that we can call upon and that have been helping us through this phase. One of my favourite figures is that we've spoken to, I think it's almost at 3,000 people now so far through the project. So like for you, those of you who are local or in Wiltshire have seen us out and about or might have taken part in some of our online surveys or focus groups we've run. And this has been really to gather people's thoughts and views about what they like about the current museum, what people might not like about the current museum, and what people really want to see as we transition over to running a museum out of the Devizes Assizes Court building. And we've been doing some slightly less exciting things. Well, depending on your perspective. So we've had lots and lots of surveys done on the Assizes Court building, as David said, and you can see from the pictures, the building is in an awful state, but what we've been doing in this phase is exploring exactly what state it's in. So things like having lead paint surveys, looking at the ground investigation, drainage, you name it, we've done it. But what the point of all these surveys is that we have a really good grasp of what the building is like at the moment, what work needs to be done, and hopefully uncovering any nasty surprises now instead of when we start building work. And then, as we mentioned, we've been developing architectural plans, exhibition designs, and what's called a draft activity plan. And this is a huge document that we submit as part of the next round of the application. And it covers all of the consultation, everyone's thoughts and opinions on what the new building should have, and creates what we call a draft action plan. And this is a list of events and activities that we would like to run throughout the next phase of the project, but also when we reopen. And these are some of the lovely pictures of my colleague Claire, our engagement officer, and Helen, our support officer, who've been out in the community, and some of the things that people have said about the buildings as well. So it's been a really fun time, and it's actually quite sad now that we've had to sort of wrap this phase of the project up and start concentrating on writing and preparing for the next phase. Anything to add, David?
No, that sounds perfect. Just to say that the various plans and documents we produce, we guess that we had something like 500 pages of application for the first round that we got back a year and a half ago. I suspect with this current round we're going to be about 800 pages worth of application. So it's not as though it's sort of dashing something off in 5 minutes. It has an awful lot of work involved. So where we are now is that we have submitted our planning application, and I'll talk in just a little more detail about that in a moment. But just to sort of go through what the building we want how the building we want the building to look, and how it will work. And again, because of the amount of consultation we've done, many of you will have seen, or sort of this will be fairly familiar to you, because although we've been adjusting things and moving things around a bit, the basics of how the building will work have been pretty much the same for about 4 or 5 months now. So, and all the slides I'm going to show you until we start talking about the displays, those are all contained in the documentation that's up on the council website, and we'll give you the URL for that later. And you can see here, this is how the front of the building will look, which in many ways, at first sort of glance, it looks completely exactly the same as it is now, except there's some subtle differences. Um, and the differences are that perhaps you can see that whether there are the columns, we've widened the steps out, and there's a new wall in front of the windows. Now that's in order to be able to give what's called a sloping floor access into the building. Because at the moment, to get through the front door of the building, you have to go up a series of steps, which is obviously not great for all sorts of people. So we will now have a sloping entrance, but we have to bring the steps out to the side because there's not space to get a pushchair, or well, you can just about squeeze through between the column and the front wall of the building, but there's not enough space for a pushchair, or if you count bags or wheelchair or anything like that. So we've got to bring the steps out to give the space to come around the front of the columns to go in through the front door so that everyone will enter the building in the same way. Um, yeah. And then we have the floor plan of the building. As I say, this is in many ways similar to ones that you may have seen before. So you go through the columns into the main entrance hall. There's a welcome desk somewhere in the middle or to the right-hand side. The sort of some of the detail of exactly where particularly furnishings and things like that will be are all subject will all be sort of looked at again and maybe subject to minor changes before we actually get into the building work. But the planning application really needs to look at the broad outline and to sort of make sure for the people who look at it, particularly Wiltshire Council, the Conservation Officer, and Historic England, that we are doing our best to preserve and enhance the building and also make it workable. Um, so what you'll do is as you come through into the entrance hall, on your left, you will have passed our learning centre. That's where the schools will be able to go. It's about twice the size of our current lecture room. And our record, by the way, for children in our current lecture room is 90. I don't know how on earth they managed to fit in. So that will give our learning officer, Ali, the flexibility and the space to really engage with school groups. And you may see that there's an entrance to it as well from straight in from under the columns. That means that we can have it open as well when the rest of the building is locked. People can come in through there for evening events and if any sort of days when we're closed or something like that, but particularly evening events because it has its own loo and it'll have a tea point as well, so you can sort of make a drink and have small scale events in there as well, separate to the rest of the building. So from the entrance hall at the top left is what was the main assize court, uh, and that will become our multi-use event space. So that will seat something like 120 people. Um, that's the guess estimate at the moment, and will be and we'll have sort of AV facilities and all that sort of thing. The other thing that's quite fun is that we've just realised that with talking to the architects that the floors are going to be of timber, and so that we will be able to provide have the outline of the cells that are in the basement. Those will be able to be there on sort of outlined on the floor of the learning centre, and also the gallery on the far right, the top right, which will be our special exhibition gallery. So that's one of the many ways that we'll be highlighting the story of the building and what it was used for until 1983. Then from the entrance hall, the green bit straight ahead is our cafe, leading out to the outdoor space at the rear. And you can see there's a counter in on the left and a bunch of tables. So, and the cafe, I'm sure Nicola will correct me if I'm wrong, is the thing that people wanted most from the new building. Huge consensus, I think, on that.
Yeah.
Then on with the exhibition gallery, on the lower side, you'll see we've got a whole batch of loos, and there are also loos on each side of the entrance into the main hall, the main entrance hall. So there'll be plenty of facilities there. And the way that the displays will work is if you see where the entrance, the welcome desk is at the moment, you'll see that there's steps on the way up here. That's up to the new first floor, which will be over the top of the multi-use event space. Nick will be talking about this in a bit more detail, but this is where our galleries start. So this is where steps up to the first floor, and you'll see also at the bottom, if you turn right, you'll go to a lift, and the stairs and the lift start at means that everyone will start the displays, start the exhibition at the same point, whether you're using the lift or you've come up the stairs. And from there, you'll go through the first gallery, which is here, which is the earliest part of prehistory. And we need a decent amount of office space for the people who will be working there as well. And this, it would have been wonderful if we could have fitted in offices in an attic, but unfortunately the height of the gallery, the height of the building, irritating, is just not enough to be able to get an office space in there and still provide for stairs and fire exits and things like that. So there's some real constraints. So that that's the green area on the left-hand side. So from that gallery, you go through into a new gallery above the cafe. Whoops. There and through to the first floor on the other side, which will be late Bronze Age through to the Saxon period. And from there, you'll go to a stair turret on the right-hand side. And again, you'll see there's a lift. So again, everyone will follow the same route through the building. And from there, you'll go down to the ground floor, which if I can get my mouse to behave. So you'll come down the stairs here, in there, and to the gallery at the front right, and that will be the Discover Devizes gallery. From there, you'll then go back into the entrance hall, and in the classic phrase, exit through the gift shop. And there's a little bit of office space on the right-hand side as well to support people on the desk. So that's the basic way that the building will work. Again, as I say, no surprises for those of you who have heard us talk about this before. And we now have some wonderful illustrations showing how what the building will look like. So this is the rear of the building. You see the two large courts and the infill space, which is the cafe on the ground floor and the early Bronze Age gallery on the first floor. And the idea is to sort of respect the historic fabric and make it very clear when people look at the building what is historic and what has been added. The other thing to say is that this straight on view looks very stark, and especially the sort of shielding of some of the air conditioning plant that'll be on the roof with that sort of green stuff looks quite unpleasant. But that's because this is a pure plan view. In reality, that is set further back, and also the ground here slopes away. So when you look up, you won't actually see any of that at all. It will look very different. And of course, that big square blank space won't be blank because that's where we'll want the logo of the museum. And say, come on in, because this is where we face out to the canal and the developments that are going to take place alongside the Assize Court. And then on the left-hand side, you can see a part of the stair turret. And again, the shielding there will be pretty much you won't really notice it because there'll be other things in front. And that again is air conditioning and the stair turret. Then next is a view of what that will look like, what the outdoor space will look like. Now, these are some sort of initial ideas from our landscape designers, because one of the things we need to do is to make sure that we have a secure space, not just for the museum and its collections, but also if we have 60 school children running around on a wet on a on a beautiful summer's day. I wouldn't want to be the teacher who was trying to chase them as they try to head off into town. So there's a real safeguarding issue of to ensure that we can look after our visitors properly. We probably won't be able to afford the things that look at the colonnades, for example, but we will have, as you can see, a nice space that we can use, potentially, well, obviously for spill out from the cafe, but also perhaps events like I don't know, Morris dancing or a craft fair, or Nicola's favourite is a gin bar or pizza van. You can see how that would work. And we have access down the lane from the side. You'll see there's a single car parking space that is a pre-reserved space for blue badge parking. It's there, we don't have the space at the back for public car parking, but there are something like 300 car parking spaces within a few hundred yards of the assize court, and particularly the wharf car park once we get a canal footpath on our side of the canal, but also through the development that will be taking place alongside us. So there's the parking will be not as bad as you might think. And that then brings me on to the developments alongside. So the view here, the sort of aerial view, shows the two developments. The red line is the boundary between the two. The one to the south is a company called Trevor Osborne Limited, and they're looking at how to convert the historic brick buildings of the brewery. And to the north, the other side is planned by a company called Backhouse, and is where what they call the tin sheds are. So that's all the modern buildings, the warehousing, built more recently by Wadworth. So the one on the south side, Trevor Osborne, that has they've submitted their planning application, and consultation on that has now completed, and so that's what council to consider. The one to the north, Backhouse, they submitted their planning application almost 2 years ago now, and slowly been taking into account the comments and thoughts of a wide range of stakeholders, including fairly firm views from members of Wiltshire Council, or the office and staff of Wiltshire Council, and other similar organisations. So the way it works for us is that we would have liked there to be a through route from under the archway of the brewery through to the back of the assize court. We sort of have that, but there's a new building, as you'll see labelled there in the centre, a new building which is 4 square in front of that, and we only unfortunately have quite a narrow walkway leading to the rear of the assize court. However, there is a benefit as well, which is on the essentially to the on New Park Street, just here. So that's just in front of the end of the historic brewery. It's planned that there would be a pedestrian crossing, because we don't want pedestrians crossing right by the roundabout. And from there, there'll be a very clear walkway through to the rear of the assize court. Now, for ages, I was talking about wanting to have a yellow brick road leading from New Park Street to the back of the assize court. And it struck me, you can tell how slow some of us are in thinking about these things, that in fact, what we should be looking at is not a yellow brick road, but a West Kennet Avenue. And we've been offered a number of sarsen stones that are not being used, so we could perhaps mirror the West Kennet Avenue leading from New Park Street through to the back of the Assize Court. And then that's a bit more obvious in this view, which is this is the back house development, and you can see there the walkway leading through an open garden, which is sort of at the back of the historic brewery, and across an open square, unfortunately with car parking, to the back of the Assize Court, and then on to the canal side. So what this means is that because all three applications are in at the same time, then Wiltshire Council can look at them together, and they're very keen to ensure that there is a very clear route through for pedestrians right the way through to the rear of the Assize Court, and then through onto the canal. And just sort of highlight how that could work, you can see the last two stones on my West Kennet Avenue. And the entrance into the rear of the open space at the back of the building. And again, you can see that blank space of above the cafe, which will have a nice big logo for whatever the building ends up being called. And on the left and on the right are two blocks of housing. And what we'll be doing with the outdoor space and potentially with or the whole of that route through into the rear of the Assize Court is looking how we can engage visitors and start to tell some of the stories about Wiltshire and Devizes while people are exploring that space. So I think there's huge potential to do that. And then we commissioned some watercolor illustrations to show people, particular people with the odd penny or two to spare, what the building would look like. And when when we were chatting to him, I said I wanted flags outside the building. I think he gave me rather too many, but you get the idea. And this sort of highlights one of the things that we can't do in the current building because we're not allowed to have flags because we're right on the street, conservation area, all sorts of other things, is that with the Assize Court, we will really be able to make so much more of a mark and impression on the town. And you can see how the building will be accessible for those who find stairs difficult. And it took me ages to realize what this one was. And I think, Nicola, this is the one we got for free because
Yeah.
we commissioned him to do two illustrations, and he liked the project so much he did a third for us for nothing, which just unheard of. I think he's normally doing boring housing estates, so I think this was a nice challenge for him. And this is a cross section through the building. It took me ages to realize that. So you've got the columns at the front, the main entrance. You've got the walkway through to the atrium, and then on the left-hand side, he's managed to make a bit of the wall invisible, so you can see people sitting in the cafe. And I love this because it really does give an idea of the vibrancy of the space. Though unfortunately, we don't have a copy of the Laughing Cavalier, which is a bit disappointing. But this really brings the space to life and a real sort of advocacy illustration. And then this is what the how the back of the museum would look. And you saw, I sort of talked earlier about how that blank space above the cafe, we'll do something with it. That might be, as you can see, picking up on the idea of the bush barrow lozenge and having something gold coloured or bathstone coloured, and all the logo of the museum to say, come on in. And you can see what a wonderful space this would be. So these are the plans that we've submitted to Wiltshire Council. There's a deadline for responses to the consultation, which is the 13th of February. And you can see here the reference, the very snappily titled PL 2024-11583. And just to give you an idea of the number of documents, what I've done is done screen grab of all the documents that were submitted with the planning application. Altogether, this is something like 30 megabytes of stuff. But if you want to look at any of these in more detail, then you can download them. But what I would say is that the key document is this one here called the Design and Access Statement. That's pretty chunky. It's about 20 megabytes, but that has a lot in about the history of the building. It's got a lot of the plans and diagrams that we've been showing you, and really does give an insight into what our plans are. I think Nicola's favourite is probably the bat survey, because we've had
Oh,
umpteen
that's
bat surveys, and yes, we do have bats, and yes, we are going to look at them, but we don't need to spend £100 million on a bat shelter. But we will be doing quite a range of things to make sure that we keep our bats nice and happy and safe.
I think it's called a bat mitigation strategy.
Yeah, it's probably on there somewhere. But that shows you the level of detail that the application has gone through. Um, Later on at the when we finished, I will put in the chat. I'll put in the link for this. Please do take a look, and particularly if you think what we're doing is not bad, please go and make some comments on the website, because the council really does take notice of what people say. There's only one comment on there at the moment, which is about public protection, which is it's very much a sort of boilerplate paragraphs and looks really, really forbidding, but it's actually exactly the sort of thing that our architects are used to dealing with. So I think if that's okay, Nicola, I hand over
Yeah,
to
I
you,
think so.
unless I've forgotten anything.
No, I think there's some light reading there for everyone at bedtime.
If you have difficulty falling asleep, there you go. Actually, the design access statement is actually an interesting read and lots of nice, pretty pictures.
Yeah, there's not too many words, is there? Okay, thanks, David. So the architects have designed this amazing site for us. So our next job, or well, while we were working on these plans as well, is to look at exactly what we're going to put into the new building and how we're going to bring our collections to life in a whole new site. So I think David's already talked through a little bit about how the building works and the visitor we will ask visitors to take on. Quickly, while we're on this floor, I'll mention the special exhibition gallery, which is number 6 on there, which will be separately accessed. And what we'll be doing over the next couple of years as we're going into the construction phase is also working on an exhibition program that will start once we open, and once we've got sort of the first year or so of visitors through, we'll be looking at doing some exciting special exhibitions. I imagine quite a lot of you came to our Eric Ravilius exhibition and perhaps our Thomas Hardy exhibition, so we'll be looking at doing exhibitions of that sort of standard where possible as well. So could I have the next slide, please, David?
Oh, yep, sorry, I've forgotten I was on slide duty. I turned off. There we go.
Brilliant. So, as David said, visitors will come in and be welcomed at the welcome desk, and then head upstairs. And what we've been working on with our exhibition designers, image makers, is what we call at the moment REBA Stage 2. So this is concepts and ideas, themes for the galleries, and sort of broad outline of, we'll have a case roughly there, we'll have some graphics and signage there. We're now moving on to what we call REBA 3, which is the developed design, which is actually thinking, right, so we'll have an interactive that goes there, we'll have a case full of X, Y, and Z there, and going on to that. This is all still subject to change. Nothing is set in stone at this point. And it's not till we get into the next phase of the project where we go into really detailed case layouts, looking at exactly where objects will go, and then writing the content for them. So this has been quite a fun process. I don't know if it has been for you as well, David, but it's been quite enjoyable to sort of almost start from scratch and think, what do we really want to tell? And a lot of what we want to tell is already in our galleries. It's just looking at how we can use the new space to really make them shine in a new way. So as you come up the stairs, the first gallery you'll be greeted with, we're internally titled Inhabiting the Landscape. And this is linked to one of the major themes we want to tell across the new museum, which is about nature and climate and about sort of people's connection with the land as well. So people will be greeted to a small section on Wiltshire's geology and showing off parts of our natural history collection, and then move into the Paleolithic and Mesolithic areas. And what we really wanted with this design is to put people into the landscape, really transform people at viewpoint and feel like you're back in prehistoric times. So there's lots of large graphics, lots of props and set pieces around this room to really sort of set the atmosphere. And image makers have been looking at what soundscapes we might be able to put in as well, and lots of lighting as well. And you'll see at the moment there's lots of arrows pointing to displays and interactives. And that's what we're working on at the moment, is actually to think, what interactives can we put where? Because what we really want, and I think a lot of people have said one of the strong points about the current museum is how much there is to do for families, how much there is to interact with, and not too much of it's digital. What we really like is being able to be tactile, for people to use the different senses and really sort of engage with our objects and with the collection. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is a top-down view of the first gallery. So you'll see the offices at back there with some nice windows for the staff to look out at over. But visitors will come upstairs and then enter, as we say, see a small geology section and then enter into a bigger gallery, which will take you through the Paleolithic and Mesolithic times. And what we've tried to do here as well is create a way round. So it's not just a huge open space that's a little bit overwhelming. You actually have more of a little path through to follow, and which helps quite a lot with chronology as well. And then something I really like, and next slide, please, David, is that image makers have come up with some great ideas of how even more to bring the landscape to life. So here we've got the part of the West Kennet Long Barrow, that there's an idea that we can sort of create a optical illusion to sort of make you feel like you can see down the passageway, and have the objects on either side of it as well, which I think could be a really, really lovely way through. Anything to add on those ones, David?
I think, well, the interesting thing about looking down the passageway at West Kennet is that in the equinox, the sun would be rising straight down, as it would be sort of rising straight ahead of you. So it's a chance to sort of highlight that alignment, which is something that not a lot of people know, particularly because there's huge stones blocking it now.
Yeah, so these are all still in draft designs, but as you can see, there's some really interesting concepts and playing with the space we have got to really bring people into that prehistoric landscape. Next slide, please. Right, and then we move on into the next room. And the way the gallery designers have described this, I really love, which is that this room is at the center of the building, and very fittingly, it houses the gold from the time of Stonehenge, which in many ways is the center and the heart of our collections as well. So this gallery is part of the infill that we're putting back in. So it's not doesn't exist at the moment. It will be above the cafe space. And this will be a slightly different tone from your sort of very landscapey, soundscapey first one. And in here, if you go to the next slide, please, David. you'll be greeted with 5 display cases. And we really love what image makers have suggested with here is to suggest a 5-piece way of making them into monoliths. So it's almost like you're walking into the Stonehenge stone circle. And David, you were very keen on this idea. I don't think you want to say anything in particular.
No, that's spot on.
Yeah. And what these cases will have in is some of our sort of main characters from our Bronze Age gallery. So those of you who are familiar with it, for example, perhaps like the lady with the amber necklace and some of the others were there. And then we also have our Britain cabinet, which is on the right-hand side of that gallery, which has got its own little models of Stonehenge on it. So that's bringing a more modern piece into our prehistoric galleries, which I think is a really interesting idea and sort of shows the start of our society, but how it links all the way back through these collections as well. And could I have a next slide, please? And yes, so this is another look of the monoliths. One idea is potentially to use Stukely's drawings to really bring the sense of the stones into the gallery, and looking at some sort of ceiling light to again sort of mimic the sunrise, sunset aspect of Stonehenge as well. Next slide, please. And this is one of my favourite parts in this, which is for our bush barrow display, will have its own wall. So those objects really can have a chance to show how important they are, and people can really explore them in a little bit more detail. And this again will show a depiction of bush barrow, and a replica of the burial will be half entombed into the set. So you almost look like you're discovering the replica and the skeleton inside there, which I just think is such a lovely idea and will really give you a sense of what it was like for Cunnington to find this burial as well. And again, we've got lots of things that say interactive put here. So these are some of the decisions we're making at the moment. But I think we can have a lot of fun with these interactives. Next slide, please. Fab. And then after we are moving on from this time of Stonehenge, we come into the later archaeology and into the biggest room that we have, which will cover Iron Age, Roman, and Saxon. And what I really like in this room is that we're going for a bit more open plan, but we have a huge set piece as you just walk in. And if I could have the next slide. Hopefully, yes, so you can see from here. We have a half of a Iron Age house, which will be able to fit groups of around 15 people in, which means that we can do demonstrations, we can have schools in there, we can have object handling, and it gives us a real space for people to gather for talks and activities and really feel immersed in the galleries as we're going as well. And then what we're doing is differentiating time periods through different building structures as you go. So you'll be able to tell that when you move out of the Iron Age period into Roman and into Saxon as well. Anything to add on these ones, David?
Well, I think just to highlight what you say about the Iron Age, the late Bronze Age Iron Age hut, because that will be quite a set piece, and you imagine doing storytelling in there, for example, really brings it to life.
It's lovely. Yes, so again, at the moment, lots of empty cases. So one of our next jobs is going to start to look at what themes are going to go into which place. And then on to the final gallery. So after all the archaeology, people will then head back down the stairs to discover Devizes. And I think probably since our last update, this gallery is probably mostly unchanged because we were generally very happy with the gallery as it is. So what we're going to be doing in the next phase is working with community groups, in particular, to look at some of the stories and tales of Devizes that we really want to tell. We've got a lot of collections already, but it's looking at what Devizes means to people and really pulling out those stories. And one central bit that we have here is an interactive table, which we're not quite sure of the logistics yet, but we'll have some archive features so you can look at Devizes through the ages and look at some of the history behind it, linked to the castle and some of the conquests and some of the amazing history that our town has. So that's going to be a real central piece to this gallery, and sort of what the message we want to encourage people is to go out and then discover our town after visiting the museum as well. All right. That's it. Anything else to add on the galleries, David?
No, I think we
I
covered
think
it
that's
perfectly.
fine. Excellent. And then the other big piece of work we've been doing is what I mentioned earlier as a draft activity plan, which is a document we have to submit to the Heritage Fund, which our colleague Claire has been busily preparing over the last 2 years, really now. So this activity plan focuses on looking at all the consultation, all the thoughts and input that people have had into the project already, and then coming up with ideas for events and activities, some of which we already do at our current site, but new and different ways that we can engage people. So this will be running as long as we get the extra funding from next year, all the way up till 2031. So after the new site opens. And some things to look out for. So we're going to be running more focus groups and advisory groups on some of the content for the exhibitions that I've just spoken about, where we've got a project plan to work with young people to design the hoardings around the construction work on the Assizes Court, which I think could be quite a spectacle. We're planning things like hard hat tours around the building when it's safe to do so. Special exhibitions at the current site in Long Street whilst some of our galleries are closed. And David will speak a little bit more about the Long Street closure in a minute. We're also going to be running things like garden volunteering programs, because we will now have an outdoor space, archaeology festivals, maybe with the gin bar, and family days. And things like, while the building work is going on, heritage skills workshops, so some stone carving, masonry, looking at some of those more traditional skills that people don't often have a chance to hear about or try out themselves. And that's just very small. I think this activity plan is about 70, 80 pages already. So I dread to think how long it's going to be by the end. So let's just say you'll see us out and about over the next few years. And my colleague Claire is going to be very busy. Right.
Okay. Fantastic. So, oh, sorry, are you on this or am I? I can't remember.
Oh, I can do this, that's fine.
Yeah, might as well.
So what's next? As I said, we've nearly finished this phase of the project now. So we'll be waiting with bated breath for the planning application result, which hopefully will be a positive result reasonably soon. We've got to further develop the gallery designs to get them up to what we call REBA 3. And then we have the small task of finalising 23 supporting documents, which I went for around 900 pages, David.
What's a couple of 100 pages between friends?
Yeah. For a submission to the Lottery Fund in August 2025. And we were due to hear the result later in the year or early 26. And also we have the small task of also continuing our fundraising efforts, which David will talk about in a little while. Right, so as you say, you'll see some green ticks, which shows how far we've already come, thankfully. But we're now into the development stage, which lasts 2 years. The bid will go in summer 25. We should hear a result actually in winter 25, winter early 26. And then, all being well, a building work on the actual Assize Court building would start late 26, early 27. And then we would be able to start moving galleries in late 28, 29, ready to open in 2030. So while it's still a long way to go, but we're already in 2025, so I think 2030 could be here before we know it. So, and we started this process, well, really back in 2019 in earnest, where we appointed the architects. So we've been doing this a long time, and there's been quite a few hurdles, but we've come a long way, and we're really starting to gather momentum now.
Okay, and now on to me, because something that people ask a lot is, well, what's going to happen with Long Street? Now, when we started that journey in 2019, as Nicola said, we hoped that we would be able to move lock, stock, and barrel onto the Assize Court site, but that would have required additional buildings and a basement and all sorts of things. And my back of the envelope guess is that that would have cost 25, possibly even 30 million pounds. So because of the changes we've had since 2019, COVID, Russian invasion of Ukraine, which has put all sorts of prices up and all the knock-on effects. So that's never going to happen. So we're going to keep sections of the current Long Street building. So we're going to at the moment the plan is that we draw a dividing line there, because the building, as you look at it, is two Georgian townhouses, then with a Victorian Gothic front, built in 1872, opened 175 years ago to make it the museum, in the centre. And the current plan would be to vacate the left-hand section and to go down to just the other two sections. Now that makes a bit more sense when you look at the the floor plan. So what that would mean is we would vacate the current Roman gallery and the library above, and with all various stores connected with it. But what that means is we would keep the current prehistory galleries on the ground floor, and the Oxman Gallery, and the lecture room, as well as the current shop and long room, and then the block on the other side, which is sort of the Iron Age medieval galleries, the Story Devizes galleries, and then the offices above. So that will give us a huge amount of space and also lots of opportunities. Now, while one of the things we have to do as the building work starts on the Assize Court site, one of the things we'll be doing is reusing some of the cases, or as many cases as we can, from the current site. We don't want to chuck those away. We want to reuse, recycle. And so to do that, we will then have to empty those cases before they're sent off to be refurbished and then installed in their new places. So at the moment, we're guessing very early, well, either late 27 or early 28, something like that, we will have to start closing galleries at the Long Street site. But what we will be able to do is, even if nearly all the galleries are then closed because we've been taking the collections out, we will still have the Oxman and Piper galleries at the back and the lecture room. So we'll be able to carry on with lectures and events, and also to house special exhibitions of the type that Nicola talked about. For example, if you remember the snakes exhibition we had a couple of years ago, which will be commercial bought-in ones, because we will all be busy getting the new museum ready. We can't spend lots of time preparing exhibitions. But that will mean that we can carry on doing all sorts of things while all the huge amount of work and the huge amount of change is taking place. And now on to the difficult bit, which is, how much is it all going to cost? And I have to say, this is something that is very much a moving target. Nicola and I were looking at the budget only today and sort of fiddling around with some of the numbers. So what you see here is a guess estimate. We've got a meeting coming up at the beginning of March where we will start to have a much better idea, and really at that point we'll be close to finalising what we think the costs will be. And you can see there how it's split out in detail. And just in the background is the just a couple of pages from the, I think it's about 8-page listing of the building costs, which has been prepared by our quantity surveyor, and then where the money is coming from. So we will be asking the National Lottery Heritage Fund for around 8 million, and then we have to find the rest, which is a real challenge. For me, that's the most difficult part of the whole project. Lots of other challenges along the way, but the money is the number one the number one challenge. So many of you will have seen that we've already been awarded over £1 million with £500,000 grants from the Rothschild Foundation and the Julia Rousing Trust. We heard on Friday that we've been invited to submit a second round application to the Wolfson Foundation. Now, we don't know how much that'll be for, because they decide how much they're going to give us. We don't ask them, they tell us. And we also have commitments from a number of people for somewhere around 200 or £250,000 as well. So we are very much on our way. And the key thing is that with the planning application, as that is now submitted, that's one of the barriers that we have to, or one of the hoops we have to jump through before we can apply to a range of other trusts and foundations. So that's going to be the year ahead. We'll be submitting lots of funding bids. And as Nicola said, we have a professional fundraiser on board who knows how to do these things. So, and the feedback we've had from the people who are funding us already is that it's a cracking project and they want to be linked to it and to help make it a success. And we're talking to a number of other bodies and organizations about ways in which they can help as well. So a challenge, but we should be able to make it work. And I think that's basically it. We hope that's given you an overview. Nicola, what have we forgotten? Anything else to add?
Probably lots, but I think that's the gist of a very complex project.
Yeah. Okay. So we're now happy to, we'll just take a moment or two to gather our breath. I'll stop sharing and we'll have a go at answering some of your questions. I see we've had some in already, which I've not been looking at, but if you've got a question, just click on the Q&A button. And we will take it from there, because the Q&A button is nice and easy because there's a little system built in behind it, which means I can see the questions and I can see if two people have asked much the same question. Whereas if you use the chat, it's much more difficult for me to keep an eye on things and to be able to answer everyone. So those of you who ask questions on the chat, don't worry, we will answer them, but please do use the Q&A button. It's much easier for us. So on the chat, Malcolm said maybe Wadworth could donate an old sign for the Cavalier. We do have one or two old Wadworth signs as well, and yeah, that will certainly be an idea. Sally has asked where the library will be housed, which Sandy has just asked as well, and the answer is we don't know. Lisa and I meet, I think it's this week or next week, to start thinking about how the current Long Street site will work. And we really we haven't worked that out yet. But I think you'll see that the plan is to get to get the size court done. And then once that's done, we'll then move on to making the Long Street site work. So while we'll have some broad ideas at this stage, it's going to be in 2028, 2029 and beyond when we'll be starting to look at that in detail. But what we do know is we'll have plenty of space because when we did the initial bid to the lottery, I did some calculations and realized we could just about squeeze everything into either the block where the offices are or the block with the galleries, the prehistory galleries, Oxman and Piper, and the lecture room. So we know we could fit into either one of those. So we will have plenty of space because we will have both available. Right, now on to the questions. Whole series of things in one. Will there be solar panels for heating, etc.? Absolutely. Will rainwater be harnessed for flushing loos and watering gardens? No for the loos. For technical, basically, you then have to have storage tanks in roof spaces, and storage tanks, roof spaces, and museum objects are not very good bedfellows. But we will be collecting the rainwater from the major part of the building. Some of it will be used for watering the gardens. There'll be a storage tank out in under the part of the outside space, and we will also be discharging it into the canal. Now, many of you will know that there's an electric pump on Cane Hill, pumping water up from the bottom of the Cane Hill locks up to the top. So if we're emptying water from our roof into the canal, it means less is needed to be pumped up. And then the last question was, oh, and sorry, and also, of course, that means we're not discharging into the main sewers. So we're reducing the load on the water treatment plant. And the third bit of that question, have ground source heat pumps been considered? And the answer is yes. And the answer is we're not going to do them, but we will have an air source heat pumps. The ground source was too complicated and too expensive. The ground conditions are actually quite poor, and when there could be all sorts of knock-on effects because of the poor ground conditions. So there's a variety of technical reasons why that's not actually a sensible idea. I was disappointed to find that out myself. Second one, perhaps you can have a go at this, Nicola, is has space been made for a cloakroom, somewhere to leave bags, rucksacks, coats, etc.? Is there a space for mothers and babies, changing table, etc., disabled loos?
Yes, we have accessible loos on both floors, and we have a family WC as well, which has changing tables, etc. We also will have buggy storage, which can also double as storage for other items as well. We'll have lockers, etc. I'm not quite sure where we're putting them yet, David. We're going to
I can't remember either.
Yeah, find somewhere to put them in the building. So the answer to those is yes.
Yeah, and there's a bug. The outside space includes a buggy store.
Yeah.
And disabled loos.
Yes.
There's a very easy to answer to that, which is all of them will be accessible, and one in particular will have special facilities.
I think it's two, actually.
Actually, you're probably right.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Martin has asked, what's the comparison of exhibition space between Long Street and the Assize Court? That's a cracking question.
I think it's around 20% more that we get overall at the Assize Court. In terms of special exhibition space, both rooms that we currently have now have their own slight challenges. We do have in the new building, we'll have one big space, which is I think about 10 meters squared larger than the two spaces we've got currently put together, but offer us a lot more flexibility on how they work. And that goes for the entire Long Street versus the size court, where our Long Street galleries, a lot of them are, it's an old historic building with lots of tunnel bits and some space that isn't particularly usable. While in the Assize Court, a lot of the rooms are big boxes that we can then fold into however we want the exhibition story to go. So while we don't get a huge amount more space, we get a huge amount more versatile and usable space for the exhibitions.
Yeah. And Alistair asked much the same question as well. Then Sam and Mike, oh no, sorry, Chris said, are there any plans for the cells in the new museum? And the answer to that is yes. We can't, unfortunately, get easy access to the cells, particularly for visitors who can't manage stairs. So we will make sure we've got video footage, sort of video available, so people can see see the cells. And also, as I said, they will be the plan will be laid out in the timber floors of the event space and the special exhibition gallery. However, they will be accessible from the stair turret, if you remember, that's on the right-hand side, and we'll be able to take groups down. So that'll be for be able to take special tours down. Um, so that's that one. And Sarah and Mike, did I see Horatio in one of the drawings?
Yes, you did. That was currently in the Devizes gallery, though I think he may well move to a little smaller gallery that is just before the Discover Devizes gallery, which we're still looking at the moment as potentially one that looks around what the museum means to people and potentially some work for the community displays as well. So it's a move in progress where Horatio goes, but it seems like he will be coming with us in one way or another.
Okay, and Chalk Architects, that sounds interesting, has said, sorry if I missed this, but will the garden be a public space? And is there any link to the canal frontage? So when the museum is open, that it will be an open public space, but when the museum is closed and the space is not being used for anything else, then it will be locked. As I say, we've got a number of sort of security issues around how that space will work, and there will be a link to the canal frontage and the Wiltshire Council Wharf Development Strategy talked about bringing a footpath to the south side of the canal. That's to the town side. And plans for that aren't yet advanced, but we're talking to the council about how that can be made to happen, because that will really boost the this area of town, be a real boost for regeneration. And Pascal has said, will the lower ground floor be used eventually? And if so, how? I think that's the cells. So we will take special tours down there. Oh, and part of it is also being used for the to locate the air source heat pumps as well. It's worth remembering. That storage and Paul has asked storage and material from excavations. Well, the Collections Development Centre is where the collections will be held. The Assize Court will be the public-facing side, and material from excavations will be stored at our archaeology store. We've got we've got two off-site stalls, one of them just outside Devizes, one of them not far from Amesbury, and that's got something like 20 years worth of capacity. If those of you who are really sad might want to know that we make a charge to developers for the deposition of archaeological archives, and that money goes to pay both for the ongoing costs of maintaining that store, and we're starting to build up a small slush fund, which over that 20 years will hopefully pay for the next one. So, but that will not be on the Assize Court site. There's just not the space. Peter said, Are there any plans for the road directly outside the steps on Bath road crossing? I appreciate this would be up to the council. The answer is yes. What we want to see is, and what we've proposed to the council in the planning application, is that they put in a coach drop-off bay at the front, which could be then also a bus stop, which would suit us perfectly. And then also on the other side of the road to convert either one or two of the spaces, the car parking spaces on the other side of the road, to be blue badge parking. And then also the Wharf Development Strategy proposed that there was a crossing essentially just to the, where would it be, just to the west of the Assize Court, because that road badly needs another crossing where the school is. So we hope so, but as you say, that is down to the council. And the last one at the moment, although there's another, oh, no, more appearing now. Will the townhouse be sold that will no longer be used, and will the money go towards the new museum building? Yes, that townhouse would then be sold, but by the time we do that, we can't do that until we've moved the collections. So we can't do that sort of in advance. So it won't be used towards the new museum, towards the Assize Court development, because that will already have happened. It will already be open and in full working order. But that can be used as match funding for the Collections Development Centre. And obviously we'll be trying to seek grant applications and so on to bring that to reality. But that's a job for someone else, because I won't be here then. I'll have retired. And someone said, any chance of knocking down Dundas Court? The answer to that is no. It's a block of flats owned by private individuals. So unless somebody gives us a huge wad of money and we buy all the flats, the answer to that is no. Ooh, that's it for the questions on the Q&A. Oh, and Chalk Architects have said, oh, great work by the team. Design and access statement presents a narrative really well considered scheme. Wonderful. God, can we quote Chalk Architects? If you would like to put that into the your comment there into the council consultation, we'd be very grateful.
Yeah.
It's exactly the sort of thing that we'd love them to hear. And particularly the Heritage Fund would like to hear, because this is the sort of thing we can tell them of. The Heritage Fund are interested in two things. Number one is people, engaging people in heritage and sort of doing things that people want to have happen. That's the first. And the other is risk.
Yes.
They want to make sure that there's as little risk as in projects as possible. And I wish we could count the number of times that they've used the word risk when we've been talking to them. We have
Only
to have,
about fundraising.
well, no, well, everything else as well. We have to have three. We've had to have three risk registers: one for development phase, one for the delivery phase, that's when the building happens, and one risk register for after we open. They love risk, quite rightly, because this is money from people who bought lottery tickets. They want to make sure it's well spent and doing projects that are sustainable and won't come back and ask for more money because all sorts of mistakes have been made. So it's entirely logical, it's absolutely straightforward. It's just a nightmare to be
It's a lot of
it.
paperwork.
Well, it's a lot of thinking,
Mm.
and by providing the paperwork, it shows we've done the thinking and we've done our best to try and minimize the risk to make sure that the project is a real success.
Yeah. What we really want is for this to be, as David says, a sustainable business proposal as well. We're not moving to continue to lose more money. We want to adding some of the environmental sustainability also means hopefully we can minimize energy bills. We really want to make this a sustainable scheme to ensure the long-term future of the museum.
I seem to have lost. I've closed the Q&As down. They seem to have
I think
disappeared.
that's
Oh, is
they're all
that
gone.
it still?
Yep.
There's
I
not
think
no new ones.
it
So
has been a long road, but it has been a long road.
yeah, I remember seeing the building in when it would be 2008 and thinking, yeah, we need that for the museum.
Mm,
So a very long road. Um, yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there.
yeah.
Okay, so with that, thank you so much for coming and for putting up with us. And do feel free to let us know if sort of things occur to you, and we'll be letting you know more, I'm sure, in due course once we've done more on displays and things like that. So yeah, we very much want to make sure that people that you know what's happening. There'll be a recording of tonight, which will go onto the museum website tomorrow, all being well. Um, and so that if there's anybody you know who would be interested to hear more, you can tell them all about it. Oh, I said I was going to put the planning, the link for the planning application in the chat, and I'll also take the liberty of seeing if we can email that to you as well. Um, so because it would be great if people could, if you would be able to put something into the council to say, hopefully you think it's not a disastrous idea. So with that, I think we're done. We can go and have another cup of tea and say thank you very much and hope you've
Yes.
enjoyed that. And we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Uh,
Bye.
we'll, we'll be in touch. Don't worry.